Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this week's episode of the Game Dev Podcast. And today we will be talking or gushing over everything UE5, Unreal Engine 5. And today, as my guest, we have Chris Payne from Quantum Soup. Chris, can you join us?
Sorry, a little bit slow.
No problem.
Hi, happy to be here, Ed.
Thank you. So, as you probably all know, Unreal Engine released, I think it's probably about 6 months ago now, a trailer for Unreal Engine 5, and it looked amazing, and it made a hell of a lot of big promises that we did not feel people were skeptical that Epic would actually be able to deliver on. And we were not expecting this until next year. So is it the end of next year? Or yeah, I think it was somewhere around next year. However, a couple of days ago, they were going to do another live stream to show people the engine, but at the end of it, they dropped a link and they updated the downloader to allow everyone access to an alpha build. And this thing is amazing. And so this is what we will be chatting about today. It's only been out for a couple of days. Me and Chris have both had a play, and Chris has gone deep on some of the documentation. So, Chris, first impressions.
First impressions that it's genuinely revolutionary. It's extremely clever, and it solves a whole raft of problems that game development generally suffers from. And so it's absolutely game changing for environments and for open worlds. Lesser impact on character art and modeling, apart from that it's fast enough that it frees up some CPU for characters and so on. But the magic of nanite does not work on skinned meshes.
Yes, that's one of the big takeaways. So there's a number of different features which came with this version, plus a lovely new UI. However, the show has been stolen by two different technologies that have come out with it. One of them that they've referred to as nanite, which is a sort of a LOD, so load on distance on steroids, and Lumen, which is their lighting system, which it does not is built kind of as an alternative to ray tracing and doing real-time bounce lighting, which is which I think we'll go in detail, but
there's still a case for ray tracing because Lumen only does kind of like global illumination. It won't do sort of like detailed reflections. So ray tracing will still be a benefit for that. But yeah, Lumen is pretty impressive stuff, and it should. I've only had a cursory play with it, but I think it will probably massively reduce the effort it takes to light scenes, because they will just be, physically close to physically accurate straight off the bat, and then it'll only require more artsy tuning rather than a lot of work just to try to make it look as if it's even real.
Yeah, that's sort of the impression that I got. Yeah, I mean, it's really odd because this thing is a massive efficiency improver. Because so I suppose the big questions that come up, the ones I was looking, the ones that a lot of people were saying is sort of about system specifications. If you're going to need to have massively more hardcore sort of computers in order to run this, are you going to have to relearn everything? Does this mean in a year everything that we've learned in Unreal is just useless? And what are actually going to be the changes to sort of game dev workflows? So those were the sort of practical questions
Hmm.
that we were sort of looking at. Um, so maybe if we start off with those three, and then we can just gush and speculate on the on the how it does it.
Okay.
So so yeah, if you sort of never met us before, I'm an Unreal guy, and Chris, primarily, most of your experience is in Unity, isn't it?
Yes, yeah,
Uh,
and proprietary engines.
all right, um, so I'm biased as it is, and I've got some sort of my opinions on what's going to change. The big annoying thing I find is do I start working on this now? Knowing that it's not going to be stable for a year? Uh, do I start, because I want to use the toys that are in
Hmm.
there, but you, I can't justify developing on an unstable platform, so it's a real tease.
Yeah, I mean, it's a that is a bit of a risk, I suppose. It's always good to pick a version and stick with it throughout your entire development period. But yeah, I mean, I think if you're going to do something with Unreal 5 that really takes advantage of it, then you are still going to spend well over a year developing it anyway, just in order to create the art that the system can display.
Hmm.
Um, because if you wanted to do something that was like simple enough to get done within a year, you wouldn't need Unreal 5 anyway.
Yeah, that's sort of my logic. You see,
Yeah.
I want to play with it, but the actual projects that I've got on, I mean, they don't have very large. They're not using the Quixel assets, and they don't even have any assets which are even
Yeah.
close to those. And it's a sort of, the big project I'm working on is a borderline sort of 2D simple sort of. I mean, very simplistic thing. So the lighting system is going to be overkill. So yeah, it makes no sense to
Yeah.
use it. But yeah, so yeah, if we go through those questions quickly, what's
Okay.
your thoughts on relearning the engine? Do you think this is going to?
I think it's not as big a change as you might think. I mean, the primary difference is that all of the side panels just fold away, and you just pop them back up as needed. They've designed it to work that way so that you can use the majority of your screen for the 3D view, and I think that works really well. In what little time I've spent with it, obviously I'm not an Unreal power user, so I don't have any real expectations about where I should find things, and everything I was going to look for earlier, I was taking time to find it just because I don't know the UI. But I like the idea of everything folding away and giving you lots of space. I think it'll speed things up.
Yeah, the UI is lovely.
Mm.
From my experience of it so far, there is borderline no sort of where all of the standard learning of how things work, to me it looks like it's all pretty much the same. What is different is, like, I'm having trouble finding a lot of the things that I would be used to finding in. They've moved some things, and I still haven't like located where they put them, like and I haven't had a huge amount of time on it, but generally speaking, I feel like the to me it feels like a cleanup of the it feels like a cleanup of the interface with a couple of bells and whistles,
Hmm.
and then some. I mean, Unreal have always been sort of throwing out cool stuff in each new release, like, because there are a bunch of things in this that I would be super excited about if they hadn't already released it. Like Niagara was amazing, Control Rig was
Yeah.
amazing, and these are all things that they've been trying and they've been released. Uh, uh, on a practical day-to-day level, they actually will have more of an impact to me on my day-to-day
Hmm.
workflow than Nanite and Lumen will. I love that they exist,
Yeah.
but the control rig and Niagara and all of that stuff are actually things I'm going to be programming with, or are actually things I'll be doing.
I think probably the biggest change to the UI is the fact that Quixel is now just fully integrated into the UI. So you can just pop open a Quixel window. You can browse for assets on Quixel Megascans. Just like download them, add them to your project. It does a whole bunch of stuff in the background. I did notice actually it actually seems to flow faster than you would expect, and the reason for that is that Unreal is still, after it seems to have imported it into the project, if you immediately try to place it in the scene, it then pops up a loading bar to say sort of like, oh, we're not quite done yet, because it was doing a bunch of stuff in the background, and you've actually now asked it to do something where it really needs it to be done, so it has to make you wait. But it's designed so that you ask it to do that, and it just does it in the background. And if you don't, if you leave it for like 30 seconds before you actually drop it into the scene, you'd never know. It's all built around a very smooth user experience.
No, that was a brilliant idea, because Quixel Bridge I'd already been using as a place to like dump all my assets, and it had become part of my workflow. So to actually make it part of the engine itself, especially as they own them, it's genius. Having said that, I haven't actually managed to get the login to work, so I haven't actually been. That's the one thing I haven't been able to get working.
It worked fine for me. I had to sign up because I had an Unreal account. I've never used Quixel at all, but I just authorized it with my Unreal account, and it worked. Very simple.
It's just a technical thing. I think it's problem. My Epic account is a bit weird, so it's giving me trouble. But so relearning the engine, I think it's going to be very minimal. Most of it's going to be just finding where the buttons are being moved to. And most of the time, it's very logical.
Pretty much, yeah.
The other question was, would this change your workflow? I think no. The only thing this is going to do is it's going to create a number of shortcuts. Like now, if you decide to just turn on Lumen and you decide to just and to use Nanite for a bunch of things, they're just switches you flick in most cases.
Yeah. I have to say, I think it's been extremely well integrated, because in rendering terms, you have Nanite and you have everything else, and they are entirely different processes, which you can kind of tell when you go into the debug tools and you want to look at triangles, for example. In your standard wireframe view, nothing Nanite shows up. And then you have a separate list of like debug views specifically for Nanite that show you all the interesting stuff about Nanite. So it's basically two completely separate rendering processes, but they are integrated very smoothly, so that, for example, Nanite handles occlusion culling, but Nanite meshes are occluded by terrains and by non-Nanite meshes.
I think this is actually quite a good point to stop. Could I ask you, Chris, to summarize and explain Nanite, how you understand it, because you did a brilliant job previously, and we're talking about these things as if it's obvious, but this might be a lot of people's sort of first hearing.
So I did a little bit of digging. Obviously, I'm primarily using Unity, so Unreal is a bit of a not so familiar with that. But then Nanite is a new thing anyway. But I was fascinated to find out exactly how it worked. So my understanding of it is, what it does is that a Nanite mesh, it only works on kind of like rigid static meshes, so not skinned meshes, not translucent meshes, not anything like foliage that blows in the wind with a shader or anything, because if it's moving, then it can't, the system doesn't work, and you'll see why. But it takes a static rigid mesh. I believe that it voxelizes it. It takes the surface and breaks it up according to the voxels, and then automatically lods each of those voxel chunks down. I say voxels, I think, because the way that it works is that it's built off the back of Lumin, which needs a voxel representation to propagate light through the scene. And so if you've got that voxel representation, you can also use it to cast from the camera and find what surface you've hit. So I think what they've done is they've used Lumin's voxel structure to do a cast, possibly per pixel. Probably they've done some clever optimizations to do less casts, but it casts out per pixel, sees what part of an object it hits, and then it takes the triangle cluster for that voxel, sends that to the GPU, and then it repeats that for multiple pixels. There'll be probably some clever caching going on there, but ultimately what it does is it builds up a list to send to the GPU of all of the front-facing and visible to the camera surfaces at the appropriate level of detail. So it's basically like MIP mapping for models. And that, because it's doing that, it means that if the model is off in the middle distance, it can load the lowest 3D MIP map. It doesn't need to load millions of polygons. It can just load the few hundred polygons that give you the rough shape of it, and then it can stream in the rest of the model in the same way that Unreal has been for years, dynamically streaming in the upper mipmap layers of textures. So it builds on that existing tech. So they've been streaming in textures as you move around the level for years, and now they're going to do the exact same thing with models. But also they've taken away the need for manual lodding, and they've taken away the need for occlusion culling because it's built into Nanite, and it just solves so many things.